Good day everyone, and welcome to Deltascape V1.0 Savage. After being exposed to the minstrel song, we envision an augmented version of our first encounter with Alterote. Before we start, it's important to revisit certain aspects of the original fight. The first noticeable difference is the absence of railings, meaning players will need to pay close attention to their positioning and avoid being pushed off the arena. With regards to abilities, Twin Bolt behaves similarly to normal mode, targeting the main tank and his nearest party member, indicated by the tether that forms between the two players. Tanks must be ready to collapse during this mechanic, and utilize proper mitigation as it hits significantly harder in Savage mode. Secondly, we have Roar. Here, Alterote will utilize this ability far more often, sometimes even in succession, striking all players and attempting to finish off low health targets. Healers must be ready to execute their party-wide healing spells, and generally refrain from keeping players at low health for too long. Up next, we have Clamp. In the normal version of the encounter, Clamp was a telegraphed attack, and could be easily avoided. In Savage mode, however, the main tank must be ready to dodge this mechanic based on a cast bar alone, and bait the attack away from the party in later stages of the fight. And lastly, we have Cherub. Identical to normal mode, this ability brings all party members down to critical health, but is especially dangerous in Savage, as it may be combined with either Roar or Twin Bolt. Healers must quickly focus their healing spells on who needs it the most, the whole party in the case of Roar, or the tanks in the case of Twin Bolt. With these abilities in mind, let's go over Alterote's main mechanic rotations and their variations in order of appearance. At the 30-second mark, Alterote will introduce the first variation of classical elements, summoning a heavy amount of fireballs in the center of the arena. Players must position themselves close to the center in anticipation of the knockback. Slide towards the center to evade the exploding fireballs, and spread out to avoid overlapping 11-bolt markers. At the 1 minute and 40-second mark, the boss will cast the first variation of Flame, summoning a ring of fireballs at the edges of the arena, followed by another one in the center. Players must wait for the first set of fireballs to trigger, before spreading out to avoid overlapping 11-bolt markers. And finally, Collapse for the party stacking mechanic. At the 3 minute and 10-second mark, we will be greeted with the second variation of classical elements, where Alterote will summon an irregular pattern of fireballs around the edges of the arena. Players must first locate what direction is missing a fireball, and align themselves with it, in preparation for the knockback. Slide back in, to prepare for the upcoming 11 bolts, and finally, spread out, to avoid overlapping them. At the 3 minute and 45-second mark, Alterote will introduce the second variation of Flame, summoning a line of fireballs and teleporting to the edge of the arena. Players can avoid all fireballs by positioning themselves next to the boss. However, the main tank must stick to one side of Alterote, while the rest of the party remains on the opposite side. This process is necessary due to a follow-up clamp that targets the main tank, which could spell serious trouble if aimed towards the rest of the party. At the 5-minute mark, the third and final variation of Flame will be cast, summoning a ring of fireballs in the center of the arena, followed by another one at the edges. While waiting for the first set of fireballs to explode, the party must spread out to avoid overlapping their 11 bolts. And finally, move in, to avoid the remaining fireballs. The main tank, however, has the added responsibility of ensuring the boss is kept facing away from the rest of the party, due to yet another follow-up clamp. And finally, at the 5 minute and 40-second mark, Alterote will execute the third variation of classical elements, creating an alternating pattern of fireballs around the arena. Players must position themselves between the fireballs in the center, to avoid being struck following the knockback, and collapse back in the center to help mitigate the upcoming stack mechanic. At this point, you've seen all of Alterote's mechanics and their variations. and he will continue to alternate between his flame and classical elements patterns, until he enrages, close to the 10-minute mark. Keep a sharp eye on Alteroti's cast bar, and anticipate his patterns by paying close attention to the arrangement of his fireballs. Once you are acquainted with his different combinations of mechanics, it becomes a matter of polishing your strategy until you get your kill.